Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart we're getting onto the bonnet and doing a bit of work on that again. See you in a minute. Now, as you can see, the bonnet has moved on a bit from the last time when in fact I'd got the covering onto the frame, but it wasn't cut to length and it wasn't really properly fitted. So let's run through how we've got to the stage that we're in at the moment, and really that's as far as it's going at the moment until we get ready to paint the cart. Now I'm just building up some strength and layers of plastic into this front part where the cap will be cut out later on, in the vague hope that it will prevent this cracking that we had before. Okay, so it's time to start and find out whether or not this front end is going to hold, because I need to get on with the bonnet. I've marked out where the centre of the filler cap is. I'm going to use, I needed about a 60mm hole, so I've got a 64mm, I think it is, hole saw there. Just going to put a small pilot hole through the middle, and then I'm going to gently go in with the hole saw and see whether or not it all explodes and falls apart, or whether or not putting 3 layers in as a lamination is enough to secure it and keep it solid. Going gently and slowly, but we'll see what happens. So far so good. Just going to try and straighten the sides out. At the moment it's all still being held together because it's attached in the centre there, but it's not exhibiting any great sign of wanting to fly apart. The piece that I took out is still retained its shape, still curved and laminated well, so I'm cautiously optimistic, I think is the term. That's good. Yeah, that's gone much better than I had feared. We've got the cutout, it needs a bit of filing up and tidying up, but it seems quite stable. So we're just going to see if it fits now with the cap in place. Right, so after a couple of days the bonnet is pretty much sorted. I think I've done a little bit of work taking some height out of this side of it. The framework I've just been planed down a bit, and that's got me out of the big, there was about a 4 or 5mm step there. Still a little bit there, but I think that's pretty much as close as I'm going to be able to get it. I think I'm pretty much there with that. There's a little bit of fettling to be done, but it's some of this now is down to packing. If I pack this bonnet up a fraction on its fit, it'll look a lot better just by a few thou up and down. So I'm happy with that. There's only one big area of fill to do, and that's on the cowl here, where my cowl buck and master were obviously out, because that is a pretty good curve matching that one. That is the right curve, so clearly you can see that needs a bit of fill on this cowl to get it to match with that. But otherwise now all of that is pretty much right. A little bit of work to do around here, tidying it all up, but it's remained very stable for the last couple of 3 months. So I'm happy that that all works now. Right, so it's time to make a start on louvers. I need them for the side panels and for the bonnet, and I'm going to need quite a lot of them. I did a test a while back on a mould and got what I think are results that I'm happy with, but it's now time to go into mass production. A couple of things I need to do first. That is the mould that I made. I just lay a piece of acetone over it after I've put the resin in, and it leaves a very flat, nice back on things. But because I cast this off an aluminium louver, I've got like a lip all the way round, which makes it quite difficult to lay a piece of acetone on and sort of roll it out across the resin to even it out. So I'm just going to cut those bits off. It's not a big deal, it's not difficult to do, and it doesn't cause any real harm to anything, but I need to get that off to make life easier. That's got that off. That's the acetone sheet, acetate sheet, sorry, I should say. Now I'm not sure how good the resin that I've got is. It's been standing around, it's got a sell by date that is about 5 years ago, so I might have a problem with it, but we will see. And all I need to do is mix some resin, pour it in there so that it's just about there or thereabouts, and then I put that on and just roll it across, and it puts a flat back on everything and cuts down an awful lot of work in tidying up the mould afterwards. I've got myself 2 little cups of plastic. I've made a mark in them on depth so that I've got equal quantities. Got myself a pot to mix it in. So we'll just get the resin. I've got 1 hardener and 1 resin. The hardener is that one, and the resin is that one. I might just put a tag on my pots of H&R, because again you don't want to mix the 2 up. Similarly, you never take 1 lid off, or never take 2 lids off at once, purely and simply because it's easy to get the wrong lid back on the wrong pot, and you can then run the risk of causing mayhem. So we'll mark that up. With hardener and resin. It's equal parts by weight is the proper measure, but I tend to be a bit cavalier in the way I mix them. But if it's normal good resin, it will be fine. If it's gone off a bit like this has, it's a little bit more suspect. You get a bit more inconsistency, I think is the term, with the mixes, but we'll see. Right. Try and keep it as clean as I can. There's probably far too much resin there. I've usually, when I'm doing railway modelling and that, got a load of other things that I can cast using the surplus. In this instance I haven't, but we'll get 1 lot going and then we'll worry about it quantities later on and see if we can't do something to use the rest of the stuff up. So we just pour the 2 parts in, and the most important thing is to mix well, but you haven't got a huge amount of time. This stuff tends to go off within about 5 minutes. It's very low viscosity. This resin, the actual resin itself is labelled G27 LV. LV stands for low viscosity. It runs almost like water, certainly more like milk than cream, and that way it's good for getting into very fine detail. There's actually a grill moulded into the front of these louvers, so that when they're painted black it'll just look like there's a grill across the louver rather than a hole. But we'll see how it works out. So I think that's had a good enough mix now. pour some of the resin into the mould. You can see it just runs pretty well in there. But if I just left it like that, you're then faced with the prospect of having to sand the back, because there's like a meniscus on the resin that comes up above the surface, and you don't really want that because there's a lot of work involved in that, whereas using this acetate sheet, you'll see, I hope, that it just gets rid of that. So we take the acetate sheet, make sure it's clean, and then we just roll it across the resin like that. And there's a small air bubble in it there, but it doesn't really matter because it's in the middle of the thing itself. But that now has almost stuck it down to the mould. And we'll just let that go off. As I say, there might be one there that's not going to work well, but because we've got an air bubble in it, but you know, if these things are going to go every 5 minutes, as they should do, you can afford to throw a few away. You'll get some failures at some point. But we'll give that a minute or two and see. It is 25 to 11. Let's see how long it takes. I think you can see perhaps that it's starting to go already. It's a bit like these speeded up pictures you see of fungus growing. You start to see white patches appearing like there and here and here as it starts to change its colour all the way along the bottom, and there's a heat generated by this reaction. So you start to see that the where there's more resin, it will go quicker. Just along there, as you can see now, it's really starting to move. We are currently at about 2 or 3 minutes after when I started this, and it's starting to go already. What will happen is that will hopefully all take on that white appearance, like a white milk chocolate. And once it's completely gone, you should be able to strip off this back acetate panel and strip them from the mould, but for the first 10-15 minutes or so they will be quite plastic. In fact, you can see the mix that I'd got left has already changed colour, but you can see it's sort of flexible still, and that's what I'm going to use to be able to strip these out of the mould while they're still handleable but malleable, and put them onto the bonnet contour and probably just tape them down temporarily, and that will give me an opportunity to get the right curvature on them. Just leave them there for a bit, and then when they're completely set I can take them off, and then we'll either glue or attach them by some other means that we can find. But as you can see now, it's really starting to cook. And what also tends to happen is you're putting heat into the mould at the same time, so that the second mix that you put in will probably go quicker, because again you're getting heat from the mould itself to help the speed the process up, and that's what tends to degrade the moulds over time. They get warm and they start to get this surface starts to get brittle, and if you're not careful it pulls apart. But I'm just going to leave that for another 5 or 10 minutes now, and we'll come back and strip the mould off from there. Right, so we're 10 minutes in now because I've just got myself a cup of coffee. Let's have a look and see what we've got. See, that peels back. Still a little bit, no, it's still a little bit too plasticky. Oh no, it's gone. Now I've just managed to peel back that first bit on that corner, you can see it's still quite plastic, so it's not yet ready to go to come out of the mould, if you like. And I've probably just screwed up the end of that one there, but you can see the consistency you get from it, and that will gradually get to the point where it will snap, although it is quite strong. So we'll leave that for a bit, and while we're doing that, we'll just pull out the first batch from the plastic cup. It doesn't stick to polythene, which is good, so you can get it out from moulds like that without too much trouble. You can see from it the nature of the material, because at this moment in time, that is, because it's bigger and it's had more heat, this is quite flexible. It's almost like polythene, but the actual stuff itself is starting to get quite hard, and that's the sort of time I want to catch it, just before this point, because at that point you can mould it into a curve, and then it will continue to set. I've got to sort out how many I need on the sides, which would be flat like that, and then I'll need some more which will have the curve on the actual bonnet itself. So I'm going to get the bonnet in and measure that up and see how many I need, count them up a bit. Okay, so I've had another couple of minutes, I think, and it's such a long while since I've done any of this that I've got to probably have a few failed attempts, but I think these are now ready to come out. And what we do is start to just pull the mould away, and that will leave us with louvers. I don't want to pull on the louvers too much, because if they are still soft they'll distort, and that's not what I want. I don't want to stretch them or anything like that. But that's got them out, and because I want these flat, I'm just going to put them flat onto that there. You can see there is, there is a mark where the one air bubble was, but I'm not too worried. I could always go back and fill that later, but I don't think I'm going to worry too much. That now is a set of louvers which, if I needed to at this stage, I could put on a former like that and mould to a shape, and they would keep that shape then, and I'd be able to reuse them on the bonnet. At the moment these are for the side, so I'm going to keep them flat, put them out to finally dry, and again, as I say, you can just trim this material off at the moment without causing any great distress to anything, and any bits of tidying up we can do with sandpaper later on. I've just had a look at the pictures of the sevens. These things vary over time with whichever iteration you're trying to model it on, but I'm working on the latest sort of versions that are lying around in the museum. I've got 17 louvers on the right hand side of the bonnet, 17 on the left. Got 14 louvers on the right lower, and they taper down, so I'm going to need to do a bit of cutting and shutting on some of them, and 8 on the left lower side of the bonnet, and some of them facing in different ways and all sorts. That gives me 56, so I've got quite a job on to get some of these done. Just done 4. There's going to be some casualties along the way, but if I do about 60 I should be there, so probably another 14 or 15 batches, the same as I've just done, and we'll be getting somewhere. Now, cleaning these up as I go along, because it's easier to do it while they're still in a relatively plastic state, and it gives you something to do while they're drying, and I'm just running them out with a knife, cut them off the backing, and get a rough shape on them, and then they'll just have a couple of whisks of a file just to get the surplus off and get them into straight lines. I said it was a bit like milk chocolate. It's very much the same. When you're working with it, it's soft. Soon get rid of the surplus. Very little work in doing it, and as I say, it just fills in a bit of time while you're waiting for stuff to go off. One done. Move on to the next one, same thing. So there we are, in an hour we've got 12 done and 8 of them finished, so it doesn't take that long. Move on to the next batch. Right, that's got my 17 louvers marked out on either side. Started from the same point, and the bottom point has ended up exactly the same on both sides, so I'm pleased with that. They all look to be about right with regards to being square and in line. That now gives me a position to mark, to actually put a bottom and a top line for the louvers and a line for them to actually work to. And as I say, when I get onto the next batch after these straight ones, I'll actually put them on roughly in the right places. I'll probably do a batch of 4 like there, and about 4 there, 4 there and 4 there, to get the curve about right, so that they'll take some of the strain out and we can then start and actually glue them on. Right, let's get the first one on. That's just come out of the mould, and we'll just put a layer of tape on the top, a layer of tape on the bottom, and that should give it a chance to take that contour. It won't be perfect, but at least it'll get me a lot of the work done to get it working. Right, so I've got the one side of the lower bonnet section all marked out now. It's given me the shapes I needed and tried those out for the 2 bulges that are there. There's another one like that up on the bonnet at the front, further up. So I need to make 3 of those, one either side of the bonnet and one there, and I need this other big one here. This bottom line will have to continue all the way through, so these will need cutting down, these louvers, but it gives me an idea of what I need to do. So that's got the, what is the right hand side of the cart as you sit in it, done. Now I'm going to go and take the left hand side off and get all that marked out, because it's a slightly different arrangement, because you've got the exhaust pipe coming out through the side, and I think there's only 6 on that side, but at least once I've got it in front of me I can get the feel, because the drawings I've got don't give the right hand side of the cart, so this has had to be done more or less from drawings, from pictures I mean. Okay, so now begins the long laborious process of taking each vent, sanding it to shape, getting all the rough bits off it, making sure it's all okay, and gluing it on, and most importantly making sure I put them on the right way around, because I've already put all these on the body in the wrong way around actually. They've got to be effectively streamlined, so they're going on that way. Let's put some accelerator on, and it stuck to my finger. Right, this is the last one on the bonnet. Still got the sides of the under bonnet sections to do, but this is the last louver on the bonnet. 34 done. Glad to see the back of these, but of course next problem will be when we come to paint it, and I've got to paint all of the grills in black afterwards, but I'll worry about that another day. There we are. So that's it. 34 louvers on the bonnet already now. I've got to put the two blisters on, but I haven't got those yet, so that will have to wait for another day. That's got the main work done on that though. Now I've got the louvers all stuck on the bonnet and I'm ready to start and look at the side panels below the bonnet, and I now have to deal with the problem that we've got a taper where there's a moulding on the side of the bonnet, lower side, where pipe work and that goes, so they knock out a sort of cone shaped fairing, and of course that means that the louvers underneath had to get shorter. Now I've only got one length of louver which I'm stuck with, so I've got to do something with that, and it's going to be quite difficult to cut and join them without there being some sort of distortion. And the ideal thing to do would be to have to stick it on either on the big chop saw, which is far too big and far too clumsy, or to put it through the circular saw, which again is just a little bit too big and too clumsy. But it just so happens that from my modelling setup I've got just the tool for the job. That is a circular saw that is not too big and should be ideal, and it's got a little right angle slide that I can cut these things with. So really all I need to do is mark roughly where I want to have a joint, and I want to keep them reasonably high up so that they're hidden by the fairing, and then we just switch this on. Produces me a nice straight flat cut, and we can then see what length we want. Out there, same again. Does now, that gives me two flat ends which are easy enough to, I hope, glue together with a bit of the cyanoacrylate glue after a lot of fiddling around because my hands are too fat. That gives me something which needs very little work to bring it back to a smooth finish that's nice and straight and flat, and then that can go onto the side in the right place, and we move on to the next one. And I think I'll keep all of the lines of cut roughly the same level. Okay, that's got both panels, all the louvers are cut down. May need the very slightest bit of filling again. It's a difficult one to know until I've got them fixed and a coat of primer filler on and then a light wet sand down to see how they look. Just going to give this a rough coat of plastic primer just to see how it will look as a complete surface rather than different colours and things like that. It'll also give me an idea of where I've got to do the filling. There's one or two I've noticed. That one in particular is quite a bad, there's quite a big gap there. You can get your fingernail down it. Similarly there's one. and they're going to need probably a bit more work than some of the others. But once I've got it done like that, I can hopefully work my way through them almost louver at a time, tidy them up. And it doesn't matter if it runs a bit, because in some ways it'll fill. Now I'm just using a little bit of knifing putty to seal that joint now. It's horrible stuff, and ideally if you're working on metal you could just smooth it out with a bit of cellulose thinners, I think, but in this instance obviously with plastics around it would just melt everything in sight. So I'm just trying a bit in. I'm only going to do 2 or 3 of these and let it go off. It takes about 20 minutes or so, and if that then gives me something I can sand down nicely and get rid of that gap, which looks like it's doing, I can worry about the rest of it another day, because this is a paint prep thing rather than a need to have it done. The whole point of getting these louvers on was really just filling in time till the chain arrived for the back axle. Yeah, that's well on its way. It's going to need a primer filler, I think, and then another sand, but that covers up any of the joint nicely. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's probably as far as I'm going to take it at the moment, because I don't want to get sidetracked into doing a paint job on something that's not even yet mobile. Right, so that's another piece of the puzzle done, I think. I've got to a stage where I'm happy that the first 3 louvers on here are pretty much there, other than a very light sand and fill. I know I can do the rest, I know how to do them. It's now become an object that I can come back to as and when I want to, and just do a couple of these things at a time, because it's going to be quite a long involved process, and it's not, as I've mentioned with some of the other things, on the critical path, so it's something to drop onto when you've got nothing to do for half an hour or so. So I hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart, and I'll see you then. Bye!